Greetings to the brightest audience in the country, and welcome to the Dominic Enyart Show. Today, we will be taking a look at the supposed contradictions within the Bible. This is the 9th installment of our Worldview series, and we are currently testing the Bible to see if it is the Word of God. And we're trying to put it through some pretty intense, pretty vigorous tests. These tests that we came up with, we formulated these so that only a message from God himself would be able to get through these tests. And so far, the Bible, it seems to be passing all the tests with flying colors. It seems to be meeting all the standards that we are asking. If you have not seen the other installments in this series, don't worry, you will still be able to understand and enjoy today's show. But if you want to catch the other installments, head over to either kgov.com, dominicenyart.com, or go to the Dominic Enyart YouTube channel. If you are on YouTube right now, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video. We are in we're just taking our baby steps here over on YouTube. By the way, currently we are 3 subscribers off from hitting the 100 subscriber mark, which is pretty fun. We're still pretty small, but it is fun. If we could reach that today, that would be cool. So help us out there if you can. And if you are on the YouTube channel, simply head over to the playlist section, and there is our Worldview playlist right there. All a lot of fun. I especially liked our last installment. That was fun with the cross references within the Bible. But for today, we are going to be taking a look at the supposed Bible contradictions. And there are critics of the Bible who they will say, oh, well, I want to disprove the Bible. That's how they go into it. They say, I want to disprove the Bible. Let's look for things within the Bible that contradict, other Bible passages. And now, of course, if that is your mindset going in, you will find whatever it is you're looking for. The Bible is a very long series of writings, and if you want to find something that supposedly contradicts something else, supposedly contradicts, you will. It will most likely be in the most absurd of ways. For example, you might look at Noah, and God commands Noah to build an ark, and then God does not command Moses to build an ark. And then, there you go. It's a contradiction. Would you look at that? An inconsistency. And of course, Noah, he needed an ark. Moses did not, and God commanded each accordingly. There is no contradiction there, nothing even resembling a contradiction there. But if you are desperately looking for a contradiction, you will find something that you can lie to yourself and say that this is a contradiction, and no one will ever be able to dislodge that idea from your head. And a Bible critic, they might have a similar criticism of me, of Christians, and, some believers who, we claim that the Bible, that there's no contradictions. And they might say, you can perform an unimaginable amount of mental gymnastics to take clear contradictions, and you can perform these mental gymnastics to avoid seeing that as a contradiction. And this objection, the validity of it, it will vary among Christians. But I know that this is not the case for me specifically. When I was younger, I had what you would call a crisis of faith, and I didn't want anything to do with Christianity. I wanted desperately to find evidence against Christianity. I was in this very biased mindset, looking for, just anything I could find to discredit Christianity. And I was, even in that state, I would not be willing to use these so-called contradictions. And why? Why was that? Well, I had studied them, and they are, for everyone I've seen, is very easily explainable. And so even when I was grasping at straws for something, anything I could use against Christianity, I was not willing to use these Bible contradictions as my ammo, because even then I realized how ridiculous it was. Even in that most biased mindset against Christianity, I was still, not willing to use these contradictions. In fact, when that happened, it was only because of the logical consistency and the evidence for the Bible that brought me back. It was very much so. I was biased against it, but the evidence in support of the Bible, I was not able to overcome that evidence. And thank God I did. I had never been so miserable as when I was in that crisis of faith. Regardless, though, a few points before we continue here today. One, the Bible, it tells a story. And so if Bible critics, if they point to different parts along the story and they say, oh, something different happened at these different parts in the story, I will not find that persuasive. I will not find that to be an inconsistency. Stories, they have plots, and those plots have plot twists all the time. And a plot twist is not a contradiction. Two, there are many different translations of the Bible. Christians claim that the Bible is inspired by God when it was originally written in its original autographs. We do not claim that each different translation from Greek, there's a lot of different translations from Hebrew and Greek into English. There's a lot of different translations, and we don't claim that each one of those was inspired by God. And so if there was an error that was made in the translation, we are allowed to dig a little deeper, go back, see what the original language has to say, and move from there. Number three, God tells different people different things. And so to accomplish his plan, or anyone accomplishing any plan for that matter, say a project at work, a good manager, he will not tell all his workers to work on the same exact task at the same exact time. Rather, he will delegate to them different things to do at different times, and that way, all of them working the plan can then come together at the end. The same is true with God in the Bible. If he tells two different people to do two different things, that is not a contradiction. That is simply God telling different people, hey, you need to do this and you need to do this. That's all it is. And right, God, he told Joseph to bring his family down to Egypt, and God also he also told Moses that he needed to bring his extended, I suppose you could say, his extended family out of Egypt. Different people doing different things at different times, and it's clearly not a contradiction. And so when Bible critics, when they bring up things like that, it's not going to be very persuasive. Now, remember how last installment in our Worldview series, we showed that image of the biblical cross references? If you're listening to the show just with audio, head over to the Dominic Enyart YouTube channel to check this out. And with this graph, we'll pull this up on the screen, we see there that there are 340,000 cross references in the Bible. 340,000. It's incredible. And we just looked at one random chapter in the Bible, and sure enough, it had a mind-blowing number of cross references in that one chapter. And the sheer volume it had of references with other authors who wrote elsewhere in the Bible, even a thousand years later, it was insane. And so that was just a random, you could call it a security check, so to speak, and it aligned with this graph perfectly. And there's an equivalent of this graph. There's an equivalent which is a Bible critic equivalent, and we'll pull this up on the screen as well. And we're going to get through a lot of these here in the next few shows, but this is a graph of the so-called contradictions in the Bible. And so if we perform a similar random security check and just go through, look through a bunch of these, that should be telling, right? We showed the graph of all the Bible cross references, and then we did a so-called security check, random security check, and then we'll do that same exact thing here with these Bible contradictions. And so we're just going to shotgun our way through some of these. A lot of people, they claim that there are thousands of contradictions in the Bible, which is utterly ridiculous. It's insane. It's not at all smart. But we can look through, I don't know, say 100 of these, just for a sample size, 100 of these so-called contradictions, see what they say, and just kind of shotgun our way through them. And we won't have time to go through every single one, but we could get a good sample size, and this should be fun. Now, I want to jump right into all of these verses as given by atheists. I'm not going to come up with these examples on my own. I'm not going to cherry pick. I'm just looking up their list of, Bible contradictions and just working my way through the list. And so this is just straight from an atheist's website, what we'll be looking at today. And keep in mind, if you're taking the time to make a website to say like, hey, here's Bible contradictions, you probably feel pretty confident and passionate that you are right. And so these should be the cream of the crop when it comes to Bible contradictions. And so this is from atheists.org. They have an article called Bible Contradictions. Ooh, scary Bible contradictions. The first one, keep the Sabbath. Should Christians keep the Sabbath? And they point to two verses here. Exodus 20, verse 8, which says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And then they point to another verse which says to not keep the Sabbath. Romans 14, verse 5, one person esteems one day above another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. And there you go. There it is. One place in the Bible where it says to keep the Sabbath, one place where it says we don't have to. Contradiction. You dumb Christians, you like the Bible. There you go. Already disproven. This is remarkably dumb, this argument. And it misses the entire point of the Bible. So to the Bible skeptic, to the atheist out there, how this worked was for thousands of years, Israel, and that's the Jews, Israel, they were under a law, and they had to perform many works of the law. They had to keep the law. And this wasn't just a, governmental, drive on the right side of the road type law, but these were symbolic laws. And this law, it was given by Moses. He was considered the lawgiver. And he wrote the book of Exodus, which is where this says, keep the Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And he wrote Exodus, so he wrote that. But then the Apostle Paul, he came along 1,000 years later, and God gave him a message. And his message to Paul, he said, hey, this law thing, I gave it through Moses a little bit and a little bit through Abraham. Anyways, that was all for Israel. I'm going to stop doing that. We're gonna stop that for a little bit. And I'm going to give you specifically, Paul, I'm going to give you this thing called grace, and then believers who come after you, they're not going to be under the law anymore. They're going to be under grace. Grace instead of law. It's a plot twist. It changes up a little bit. And under grace, you don't have to keep the Sabbath anymore. You're welcome. How cool is that? You get an extra day. You get an extra day of the week. And of course, Paul, he wrote that second verse that we read in Romans there. All right, next contradiction. Will the earth abide forever? Is the earth going to be here forever? And they will point to two verses which they claim contradict each other. Ecclesiastes 1:4, the earth will abide forever. And then 2 Peter 3:10, the elements shall melt with fervent heat, the earth also, and the works that are therein shall be burned up. And so a few things about these two passages, especially that first one with Ecclesiastes. It's handy that this atheist's website, they deleted the surrounding context of that Ecclesiastes 1:4 verse. And, I'm sure it was just, an honest mistake. And they didn't accidentally just copy one verse and just remove the surrounding verses, but they actually copied only one part of a sentence. They didn't even copy the rest of the sentence when they were trying to share this verse. But so, maybe I'll be a little more diligent than they will. And I will look at the entire beginning of Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And if we read that, it says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever." So pretty clearly here, the point that the text is making, it's not about the longevity of the earth. That's not what this is talking about, but it's talking about the impermanence of man. And so if a father, if he's encouraging his son to go work in a different country, or, move to New York where there's better career opportunities or something like that, and he says, hey, don't worry, Kansas isn't going anywhere. That's okay for him to say that. He's not wrong. Even though America technically is moving about like an inch a year, whatever it is, even with that, even though the sun will, burn and ruin the planet in, like 500 million years or something, you can still say that. It's still perfectly fine to say, hey, Kansas isn't going anywhere. Go pursue your dreams. That is perfectly fine, perfectly consistent. And that's what the Bible is doing here. And then later, the Bible says, like in that verse in 2 Peter, that in the future, when it is actually talking about the longevity of the earth, it says that the earth will burn. And that's okay. That is not a contradiction. That is just two different points being made. And this raises another point, by the way. Pretty much everyone hates lawyers, right? There's a lot of good lawyer jokes, like what do you call 100 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. And so, yeah, there's, everyone hates lawyers. There's that one lawyer joke, which I really hate, or which I really love, and it's about this trucker who hates lawyers. And every time he's driving, he's got his big truck, and he's kind of this gnarly dude. He sees a lawyer walking down with his briefcase and whatever, and he just runs up on the curb and just runs him over. And then he just does that every day. That's just his routine. Every day he's driving, he sees a trucker or a lawyer, he drives him over. Anyways, one day he's driving along, he's driving home from work, and he sees a pastor who's hitchhiking. And he's like, oh man, I can't not pick up a pastor. That'd be real bad. So the pastor gets in, and then they're driving, and he's taking them to where the pastor has to go. And they're talking about life, morality, religion, science, politics, all this stuff. And the trucker, he sees a lawyer on the side of the road, so he thinks, oh, I'm gonna run over this lawyer. And he gets up on the curb and he's gonna run him over. And then he remembers, oh shoot, I have a pastor in the chair next to me. I can't run over this dude. So last second he swerves out of the way and he hears a thump. He's like, oh man, I hit this lawyer. I got a pastor in the seat next to me. This is a disaster. And the pastor just looks over and he says, hey, it's okay. I got him with the door. And so people hate lawyers. There's 1,000,001 different lawyer jokes about how we hate lawyers. They are the worst and they ruin everything for everyone. And when we read the Bible as if we are lawyers. We read it woodenly, literally. And so these atheists here, who oftentimes share our hatred of lawyers, when they read the Bible, they read it like lawyers and they read it woodenly, literally, and it's obnoxious and it wastes time. It's a waste of time to read the Bible how they do. Also, atheists, they act like God is this stagnant being who is just stuck with his one plan, and he's so weak and pathetic that he's unable to change and use a different plan, and that he's just this weak, frail little God, and that he's just incompetent and he's unable to respond to anything that happens. But that's not the God of the Bible. That's not the God we see when reading Scripture. The God of Bible, he can change his mind. If he says in 40 days, Nineveh shall be destroyed, if they repent, he is allowed to forgive them and not destroy Nineveh. He is allowed to do that. So the answer I gave is still perfectly satisfying. Yeah, if God actually in Ecclesiastes if he were trying to communicate that the earth will literally remain forever, that's what he was trying to say in Ecclesiastes. If he meant that, he is still allowed to then switch things up and destroy the earth. He's allowed to do that. The earth is but clay in his hands, and he can do with it as he pleases. And, frankly, dear Mr. Atheist, whoever wrote this article, he doesn't answer to you. He doesn't answer to you. It's almost as if you are a child and your parents told you that you can get ice cream, and then you did something evil. You stole something. And so your dad says, well, too bad. You're not going to get ice cream now. And then you say, oh, but you said I could get ice cream. The father in this situation doesn't have to answer to his little 7-year-old brat lawyer kid. So too with an atheist, when you're reading a Bible as a lawyer, God, he does not have to answer to you. All right, next objection. Has anyone seen God? This is the question. I actually heard a sermon on this just a little while ago, and the sermon, it wasn't talking about this objection specifically, but it was an interesting sermon. I wish I remembered the guy's name. Anyways, this atheists.org, and they point to two verses here, Genesis 32:30 and John 1:18. Genesis 32:30 says, I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And then in John 1:18, it says, no man hath seen God at any time. And so, yep, there you go. It's a contradiction. And John, he was an idiot. He wrote this and because he's dumb. And now the atheist site, it makes it out to seem like this was just a slip up. Like, oops, I forgot to account for, this verse back in Genesis 32. And, the Bible authors, they let out a contradiction. Oops, like that's how they try to portray this. But obviously, there have been many occasions where man had seen God previously before that point, or a representation of him at some point. For example, God appeared to Adam and Eve in the garden, and God walked among them. He wrestled with Jacob. By the way, that story with God, when he wrestled with Jacob, he changed Jacob's name to Israel. And Jacob, being Israel, he was the father of that nation. He was the father of Israel. The people of Israel, the people of Jacob, it's kind of the same thing. And something interesting, that word Israel, that actually means something in the Hebrew. And Israel means to wrestle with God, which is very fitting, especially with what we see from Israel for the entire Bible. God, he also appeared to Moses as a burning bush. God also, he appeared to Joshua as the commander of the Lord's army. He appears to people in the Old Testament all over the place, and he's called the angel of the Lord. And so John, he wasn't just a moron who just forgot about all these stories, which are so crucial to their culture. It'd be like if we forgot about World War II or we forgot about the Civil War. No, we wouldn't do that. We almost couldn't do that. And so John, he wasn't an idiot who just forgot about his entire culture's history. And also it's worth remembering that Israel, their history as a culture was way more important to them than our culture is to us today. So it'd be like us forgetting about World War II times, tenfold. But so it's not something that John would do, and he wasn't an idiot. And since he was not an idiot, and then yet he still said, no one has seen God. And John, he's obviously here having a very big impact. People thought that he was God for a bit. They asked him, are you God? And he was like, no, I'm not God. They thought he might have been Elijah. They said, are you Elijah? And he said, no, I'm not him. And so it's not like this dude was just an idiot spewing out nonsense that disagreed with everything their entire culture had said thus far. But he was making a point. No one has ever seen God. That's what he's saying. And he's saying that no one has ever seen God in his entirety, right? God is this magnificently eternal being. He is infinite. He is remarkable. He is unquantifiably remarkable and large and larger than life. And humans literally literally, we are unable to see something that is infinite. And so God is infinite. And so, we might have seen little parts of him here and there, but we have not seen God in his entirety. All right, on to the next one. Should Christians practice human sacrifice? Spoiler, the answer is no. we should not do that. And they will point to two verses here. Leviticus 18:21 is the first one that they'll point to. And it says, "And you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." And so there you go. Don't let your descendants pass through the fire to Molech. Essentially, this is saying don't practice child sacrifice. And I think that's good. I think that's good. We should all be in agreement. Child sacrifice is bad, unless you're a pro-abort, right? Then maybe you're not on the same page as us. But for the sane among us, sure, yeah, child sacrifice is bad. We all agree. Now, for context, when God commanded this, they were sacrificing their children by taking metal beams, and they would place them on top of fire pits, and then those metal beams would become extremely hot, and then they would take their newborn babies and place them on those metal beams and essentially watch them sizzle to death. And their children were so little that they couldn't even crawl away. That's how little these children were. And so that is the evil that was going on at the time. And God, he actually later says, like, oh, that was so evil. It never even came in my mind to, command something like that. A lot of people accuse God and they say that he commanded every evil action. But there God says, bro, that didn't even occur to me. And so, but regardless, the Bible is anti-child sacrifice, which is good, or, just human sacrifice in general. And so the atheist will share that verse, he does here, and then they follow that up by pointing to Judges 11:30 and 31, and Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, "If you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then it will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the people of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering." Jephthah, is that how you say his name? Jephthah made a contract with God to burn the people of Ammon as a sacrifice. There you go, right there, clear as could be, contradiction. And now, God, he obviously kills people and he commands people to kill other people. That happens all the time. And God, he even helped Jephthah here kill people. But quick grammar lesson, if you're going to refer to a group of people, you use words like they or them or even maybe those people or that family or something like that. You would not use the word it. You would not use the word it. Maybe some silly people nowadays would ask you to refer to them and use the word it. But the translators of my version of the Bible, the New King James, when they translated the Bible, they didn't have any of that silliness going on, so they didn't have to worry about that. When they were referring to people, they used things like he, him, she, her, they, them, not it. And here, they translated Jephthah's words as, I will offer it up as a burnt offering. He did not say, I will offer them up as a burnt offering. I will offer it up as a burnt offering. And now that doesn't mean that he didn't kill people. He did, but he did not sacrifice those people. Now, if someone were to say, wow, the city of Boulder, it's a very evil city, I'm going to offer it as a burnt sacrifice, which that would be really bad. Don't do that. But if someone were to say that and then go kill all the people in Boulder and then light it on fire, the people of Boulder would already be dead. You're not offering them as a sacrifice. They are already gone. And so Jephthah, he killed people. The morality, that's something that of him killing those people. Maybe we could discuss that later on in this Worldview series. But that's one thing that we'll talk about later. But when he killed those people, What he does with the cities after they're gone, that is not sacrifice. It is whatever it is, but that is not a sacrifice. They are already gone. And so, yeah, he killed people, but it was not a human sacrifice. What he did with the cities, not a human sacrifice. All right, next objection. Is God all-powerful? Another spoiler alert from the Bible. Yes, he is. And so these atheists here on atheists.org, they point to two verses. Matthew 19:26, and that says, let's see what this says. But Jesus looked at them and said to them, with men it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And then that apparently contradicts Judges 19, which says no, that God is not all-powerful. And that reads, this is Judges 1:19, so the Lord was with Judah, and they drove out the mountaineers, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowland, because they had chariots of iron. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. The atheists over at atheists.org, they got a real stumper here. You know, we're in trouble, us Christians, with this objection. Critics of the Bible, they do this thing where they will take the very point of a story, the very point that the story is trying to convey, and they will say that point is the contradiction. They think that they're so scholarly and they have all these best criticisms, yet they need to be a little bit more critical of their own criticisms. That would help them to avoid looking foolish sometimes. And so the book of Judges, they're quoting Judges chapter 1 there. That's right in the start of Judges. But the book of Judges, it comes right after the book of Joshua. And if you're not aware, Joshua is about the conquest of Canaan, which would then become Israel. The land of Canaan was, Joshua went on a conquest, took it over, and then it became the land of Israel. And all throughout Joshua, it details these various battles that they had with different people who were living in the land, and things are going well. They're trusting in the Lord God. They're having courage, bravery, and they're having victory in their battles. And then they do something sinful against the Lord, and then they fail. And they're faithful and they succeed, and then they're unfaithful and they fail. They're faithful and they succeed. They're unfaithful and they fail. It's this, just this cycle of when they're faithful, it works out for them, and when they're not, it doesn't. And so that's a big theme of Joshua, is that when you are faithful, things will work out for you. And so in Joshua 3:10, we read, God is among you. He will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites, and the termites, the lot of them. He's going to drive out everyone. And then the people, they sinned against God, and a generation later, we see this. This is actually in the next chapter right after that, Judges chapter 2. And then the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you up from Egypt and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Therefore, I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare to you. So it was when the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the children of Israel that the people lifted up their voices and wept. So the people of Israel, they messed around and they found out. The entire point of this story is that God helps them when they're being faithful and doesn't help them when they are not faithful. Very simple, very clear message. And the people of Israel, and we see this all throughout the entire Bible, it's almost like they're bipolar. They're almost bipolar. One morning they wake up, they're faithful, and by that very night they are unfaithful and in rebellion against God. And we see Israel, which means to wrestle with God. We see Israel, they're like that throughout the entire Bible, so consistently, they're consistently inconsistent. They're consistently bipolar, always, one morning, wake up, everything's good. By that night, it's a disaster. We see that throughout the entire Bible, and yet God is faithful through that, which is cool. And so God was with them in this verse. They had a victory, and then they lost because to another group because the enemy had chariots of iron. What does that teach us? Do you know what that teaches us? That teaches us that God was no longer with them after that first victory in this verse. We read just a few chapters earlier that God, he rained down boulders from heaven. Boulders from heaven were raining down on the enemies of Israel and killed them. That teaches us two things. One, don't be an enemy of God because you will lose. You will. But two, God is able to handle some chariots. Some chariots is no big deal for God. Not to mention the whole fire from heaven during the whole Exodus, just a generation before, and drowning Pharaoh's army in the sea. Their cavalry, their chariots, their foot soldiers, their archers, the entire army was destroyed in the sea. Some chariots of iron isn't going to be something that, gets in God's way. So do you get that? Do you get that God is able to handle some iron chariots? God can handle whatever, but the people of Israel, they cannot handle some chariots. So this verse, it teaches us that God was with them. They had victory. And then when they failed, that teaches us that God was not with them for that second battle. All right, next objection. Should Christians circumcise? Yeah, I know a thing or two about this. Genesis 17:10, this is my covenant which you shall keep between me and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. And then fast forward to Paul in Galatians 5. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Christ will profit you nothing. Oh, there you go. Christians need to circumcise according to Genesis 17 and don't need to according to Galatians 5. There you go. Bible contradiction. What are you going to do with that? Too bad, so sad. This is why I'm an atheist. Remember how earlier in the show I said that God, he tells different people to do different things at different times? Remember how I said that? And how Israel was under the law for thousands of years until Paul came along and changed things up? Well, same here. God, he changed the plan. The descendants of Abraham, they were supposed to keep this covenant of circumcision. They were supposed to keep that forever. That's what they were supposed to do. That was the plan. And then Paul records, he records in Romans 11, he records that their sin was so grave and so egregious that God, he cut them off, which that's fitting, right? Circumcision, cutting off. The people of the circumcision, the covenant of circumcision, they were cut off. And one day they will be grafted back in again. That's how Paul records this. He says that Israel, the covenant of circumcision, will be grafted back in, which is really cool. And then that covenant that we see back in Genesis 17, that will continue. But in the meantime, Paul, he came along, and then God said, hey, you know how I gave that message to Moses about the law and circumcision? And I gave that to Abraham. Well, I'm giving this new thing to you in the meantime, and so that you and the people after you, you don't have to keep the Sabbath, you don't have to keep circumcision, you don't have to keep the law. Here we have grace, which is it's pretty cool, huh? We don't have to circumcise anymore. That can be helpful. And so, once again, the Bible critics, what they're doing here is they're taking the entire point of the story. They're taking this most interesting, fundamental Christianity 101, like, oh, here's a little change. They're taking that and saying, oh, look, it's a contradiction. It's a contradiction. And so I don't want to be mean, but it's honestly, their criticisms are embarrassing. They're embarrassing. They're kind of pathetic, and, I don't know. They have no substance to them. They're just so easily handled every single time. And right, I'm sold on the Bible. I'm pretty sold on the Bible. I think it is the Word of God at this point. I feel like I could come up with so much better arguments against the Bible than what these people are saying. I'll have to do a show sometime called Devil's Advocate. That'd be fun. But like I said at the start of the show, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not like coming up with like straw man arguments like, oh, here's what the atheists say. I'm not doing that. These are actually the very best, top-notch, top-tier, cream of the crop, best so-called contradictions that these atheists offer themselves. I promise. I didn't hack their website. I didn't throw up a bunch of softballs. I didn't do any of that. This is what they put up as their best arguments. This is what they are saying is their very best. And it's kind of embarrassing, frankly. And we have more to get to, but we are out of time. And we're going to go through a lot more of these contradictions. I think they are a lot of fun. Make sure to join us next week for that. And we are going to have to continue working our way through, just kind of shotgunning through some of these Bible contradictions. And we'll get through a lot of these. And there's a lot of different sites, different articles that have Bible contradictions. And I don't want to just take them from this one site. I want to get a wide, a good sample size of all these atheists and see if any of them make some better arguments than these folks over here at atheists.org. And so to make sure that you don't miss another one of these installments in our Worldview series, go to the Dominic Enyart YouTube channel and subscribe, click the notification bell, help us reach that 100 subscriber mark. That would be really, really a lot of fun. And so I do shows here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We're also going to start doing some other content aside from these little shows, which will only be available on the YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for that and help us get to that 100 subscriber mark. That would be really cool. I hope we can do that today. Hey, that is going to do it for me here. Remember kgov.com for our other weekly shows. I do Tuesday and Wednesday, but we have a lot of other shows. Hey, may the Lord bless you, and may he make his face to shine upon you.